The morning of Emma's wedding was full of excitement, laughter, and the usual pre-wedding chaos. The bridal suite buzzed with activity as bridesmaids flitted around in pastel dresses, fixing each other's hair and adjusting makeup. The air smelled of hairspray and fresh flowers, and a soft classical melody played in the background. Emma, my sister-in-law, sat in front of a large mirror as the makeup artist applied the final touches. She looked radiant, a mixture of nerves and joy glowing on her face. I sat nearby on a plush velvet chair, hands resting on my swollen belly. At 9 months pregnant, I felt like I took up too much space in the small room, but everyone had been incredibly accommodating. I wasn't due for another 2 weeks, so no one, including me, thought my pregnancy would interfere with the wedding. In fact, I had been looking forward to this day for months. I loved Emma like a sister, and I wanted to be there to support her. I had spent the morning chatting with the bridesmaids, sipping water while they sipped champagne and trying my best to keep my energy up. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. The wedding planner peeked in every few minutes to check on the timeline, confirming that we were right on schedule. The photographer snapped candid shots of Emma and her bridesmaids, capturing the last few moments before she would walk down the aisle. I smiled as I watched Emma laugh, her veil draped elegantly over her shoulders. Then, without warning, a sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. I flinched, sucking in a breath. It was sudden but brief, disappearing almost as quickly as it had come. At first, I brushed it off as one of those harmless Braxton Hicks contractions I had been experiencing over the past few weeks. My doctor had assured me that they were normal, a way for my body to prepare for labor, and that they didn't mean anything was imminent. But then, just a minute later, another wave of pain rolled through me. Stronger this time. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, pressing a hand to my belly. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, turning toward me with a concerned expression. Yeah, I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a little cramp, probably nothing." I didn't want to alarm her. This was her wedding day, after all. The last thing she needed was to worry about me. I took a deep breath, trying to relax, but then another contraction hit, making me grip the armrest of the chair. This wasn't normal. These weren't just mild cramps. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. I needed to time the contractions, just in case. If they were irregular, it was probably false labor and I could power through the wedding. But if they were coming consistently, I swallowed hard, already suspecting what I would find. 5 minutes later, after a few more contractions, I realized they were coming every 6 minutes. My heart started pounding. I leaned over to Daniel, my husband, who had just stepped into the bridal suite. He was wearing his dark blue suit, looking handsome yet slightly overwhelmed by the chaos of wedding preparations. I reached for his hand. "Daniel," I whispered urgently, "I think I'm in labor." His face went pale. "Wait, what? Are you sure?" I nodded, wincing as another contraction tightened around my belly. He glanced at my phone screen, where I had been tracking the intervals. His eyes widened when he saw the pattern. "Okay," he said, immediately shifting into problem-solving mode. "We need to get you to the hospital." Before I could respond, my mother-in-law Linda walked into the room. She was in full wedding coordinator mode, adjusting her pearl earrings and checking her watch. Linda was a perfectionist, someone who thrived on control, and today was her day just as much as it was Emma's. She had spent months planning every detail of this wedding, ensuring that everything, from the floral arrangements to the seating chart, was flawless. She saw the tension between me and Daniel and frowned. "What's going on?" I hesitated, but Daniel spoke first. "Mom, we think the baby is coming." Linda's eyes widened, then immediately narrowed. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not today. That's impossible. You're not due yet." "I know, but..." Another contraction cut off my words, and I clenched my jaw to keep from crying out. Linda sighed, her hands on her hips. "This is just false labor. Stress can cause contractions. You'll be fine if you just sit down and relax." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "Mom, she's been timing them. They're coming every 6 minutes. Linda's expression flickered, but she quickly masked it. "Even if that's true, labor takes hours, sometimes days. You don't need to leave right this second. Emma is about to walk down the aisle." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Linda, I need to call my doctor," I said, reaching for my phone. Before I could dial, Linda stepped forward and plucked the phone right out of my hands. My breath caught in my throat. "What are you doing?" She held the phone close to her chest. "I'm not letting you cause unnecessary panic. You'll call, they'll say to come in, and then you'll be sitting in a hospital room for hours, missing the wedding for no reason." I stared at her in shock. My contractions were getting stronger, and now I didn't even have a way to contact anyone. I felt trapped, powerless. Daniel looked just as stunned. "Mom, give her the phone." Linda pursed her lips, clearly torn. "Just wait until after the ceremony, please. This is Emma's day. Just try to hold off." Hold off? Like I had any control over this? I was in active labor. The baby wasn't going to wait because it was inconvenient. "Linda, this isn't about the wedding," I said through clenched teeth, another contraction tightening around my abdomen. "This is my child. I need to go." But she wasn't listening. "Emma has been dreaming of this day her whole life," she said. "You can't take the attention away from her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My water could break at any moment, and she was worried about attention? Daniel took a step closer to his mother. His voice was low, firm. "Give her the phone." For a moment, I thought she might refuse. But then, just as the room fell silent, I felt a sudden rush of warmth. I looked down in horror. My water had just broken, soaking the expensive chair beneath me. The bridal suite erupted into chaos. One of the bridesmaids gasped. Emma, still in her wedding dress, turned to me with wide eyes. Linda's face went completely blank. Daniel swore under his breath. "That's it. We're going." I held out my hand. Linda, looking both guilty and panicked, slowly handed my phone back. I didn't waste a second. With shaking hands, I called the hospital, my heart pounding as I told them I was in labor. I had no idea how the rest of the wedding would go, but one thing was certain. I wasn't waiting any longer. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened as I tried to steady my breathing. The contractions were getting stronger, and now that my water had broken, there was no doubt I was in full-blown labor. But instead of rushing to the hospital, I was still in the bridal suite, surrounded by a mix of stunned bridesmaids, a panicked sister-in-law, and a mother-in-law who seemed to be in complete denial. Linda was frozen, her eyes darting between me and the growing wet spot on the chair. For a woman who prided herself on controlling every detail of an event, this was her worst nightmare. Something unpredictable, something she couldn't fix with a phone call or a stern look. "Okay," I said, my voice tight with pain. "I need to go. Now." Daniel nodded quickly. "I'll get the car. You just..." Before he could finish, another contraction hit, this one stronger than the last. I doubled over, gripping my belly as I let out an involuntary groan. Emma, still in her wedding dress, took a cautious step forward. "Should we call an ambulance?" she asked, her voice tinged with both concern and hesitation. Linda snapped out of her trance. "No," she blurted, shaking her head. "No ambulance, that would cause a scene. We just need to get her out quietly." I stared at her in disbelief. "Linda, I don't care about a scene. I need medical help." She was already turning to one of the bridesmaids. "Go get some towels and water," she ordered, as if she were dealing with a minor spill and not an actual human birth. "And someone find her a jacket to cover up. She can't walk through the venue looking like this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was actively in labor, and she was worried about appearances? The absurdity of it all might have made me laugh if I wasn't in so much pain. Daniel had had enough. "Mom, stop, we're leaving." He turned back to me and slipped an arm around my shoulders. "Come on, I'll help you." I nodded, biting my lip as I tried to stand. My legs felt shaky and the contractions were coming faster now, each one stealing my breath away. But before we could even take a step toward the door, Linda moved in front of us. "Just wait a few more minutes," she insisted. "The guests are arriving now. If you leave through the front, everyone will see. We can sneak you out the back once the ceremony starts." I couldn't believe this. "Are you serious?" I gasped. "Linda, I'm not waiting." She exhaled sharply. "It's just another 20 minutes. Emma is about to walk down the aisle. You can hold on for that long, can't you?" I shook my head, another wave of pain hitting me. "I can't." Daniel was already pulling out his phone. "Forget this. I'm calling an ambulance." Linda's eyes widened in horror. Daniel, no! That'll cause a huge scene. I don't care, he shouted, his patience finally snapping. She's having a baby, Mom. A baby. Do you get that? The room went silent. The only sound was my uneven breathing. Emma, still in her pristine dress, looked torn, as if she didn't know whose side to take. Finally, Linda clenched her jaw and took a step back. Fine, she muttered. Go. Daniel didn't waste a second. He threw my arm over his shoulder and helped me toward the door. Each step felt like a battle, my body screaming at me to stop, to drop to the floor and just push. But I knew we weren't there yet. I still had time. I just needed to make it to the hospital. As we stepped out into the hallway, I could hear the distant hum of guests chatting and laughing. The wedding was about to begin, and for a split second, I felt guilty. I knew this wasn't what Emma had planned. I knew that no matter what, my labor was going to steal some of the attention from her big day. But I also knew there was nothing I could do about it. Daniel led me toward the exit, his grip firm and steady. Almost there, he whispered. But we barely made it 3 steps before another contraction hit. This one, so strong that my legs buckled. I let out a sharp cry, gripping Daniel's arm like a lifeline. That was when the doors to the main hall opened. A few guests turned to look, then a few more. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. I could hear snippets of conversation. Is she okay? Oh my God, is she in labor? Wait, is that Daniel's wife? Linda had been right about one thing. There was no sneaking out now. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep myself together, but the pain was unbearable. I felt a hand on my back and turned to see Emma, her wedding dress flowing as she crouched beside me. I don't care about the wedding, she whispered. You're more important. Let's get you to the hospital. Tears stung my eyes, not from pain this time, but from relief. Linda, standing stiffly nearby, finally exhaled in defeat. Fine, she muttered. I'll have someone bring the car around. Daniel shook his head. No, we need an ambulance. He pressed the call button, and for once, Linda didn't argue. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air. Paramedics rushed in, asking me questions, checking my vitals, assessing the situation. I barely registered any of it. I was too focused on breathing, on surviving each contraction as it came. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught one last glimpse of Emma. She smiled at me, her eyes shining. Go have your baby, she said. I'll be waiting to meet them. Then the paramedics wheeled me out, and the wedding disappeared behind me. The cold air hit my face as the paramedics wheeled me out of the venue, the chaos of the wedding fading into the background. The sound of the guests murmuring, the classical music playing softly inside, and even Linda's protests all felt distant compared to the overwhelming contractions gripping my body. I clenched my jaw, trying to focus on anything other than the pain, but it was nearly impossible. Every muscle in my abdomen tightened like a vice, making it hard to breathe, let alone think clearly. Daniel was right beside me, his hand wrapped around mine, his expression a mixture of panic and determination. You're doing great, he said, though I could tell he was barely holding it together himself. Just a little longer. The paramedics worked quickly, lifting me into the ambulance and securing the stretcher. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice, leaned over me. All right, sweetheart. How far apart are your contractions? I struggled to answer, gripping Daniel's hand as another one hit. 3 minutes, I gasped out. She nodded, exchanging a glance with her partner. All right, we need to move fast. Daniel climbed in beside me as the doors shut and the ambulance lurched forward. The wail of the siren filled the air, and for the first time since this whole ordeal started, reality truly sank in. I was about to have this baby. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Possibly even in the next hour. I turned to Daniel, my chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. I don't think we're going to make it to the hospital in time. His grip on my hand tightened. We will, just hold on, okay? But even as he said it, I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. The paramedic placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We'll get you there as fast as we can, but if this baby decides to come before that, don't worry. We've delivered plenty of babies in ambulances. That should have been comforting, but it only made me more anxious. I wasn't ready for this. I had imagined labor happening in a controlled environment with doctors and nurses and all the equipment I needed. I had a birth plan. I was supposed to have time. But time wasn't on my side anymore. The pain intensified, radiating through my back and legs. I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing on my breathing like they had taught me in prenatal classes. In through the nose, out through the mouth. But the contractions were relentless, crashing over me like waves, with barely any time to recover in between. I felt a warm hand brush against my forehead. "You're doing so well, baby," Daniel whispered. His voice was strained, like he was trying to stay strong for me, but I could tell he was just as terrified as I was. The paramedic checked my progress, her face unreadable for a moment before she looked up. "You're already at 8 centimeters. I barely registered the words at first. Then my heart skipped a beat. 8 centimeters. I wasn't just in labor. I was almost at the finish line. Daniel's face paled. That's really close, right?" The paramedic nodded, already grabbing supplies from the medical kit beside her. "Yeah, if you feel the urge to push, you need to tell me. Immediately." Panic rose in my chest. No. I can't have the baby here. We're almost there, right? Tell me we're close." The paramedic's partner, who had been driving, glanced back at us. "We're stuck in traffic. There's an accident up ahead. We might be delayed." My entire body tensed. Delayed? You've got to be kidding me. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his frustration barely contained. "There has to be another way." The paramedic shook her head. "We're moving as fast as we can, but at this point I need you to prepare for the possibility that this baby is coming right now." A fresh wave of panic surged through me. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I wasn't ready. But ready or not, my body had already made the decision for me. The next contraction hit like a freight train, and I let out a cry, my body instinctively tensing. The paramedic's voice cut through the haze. "Breathe. Stay with me, sweetheart. Don't fight it. Just breathe." Daniel brushed a strand of hair out of my face. "I'm here. You're not alone, okay? We've got this." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But my body had taken control, and I had no choice but to surrender to it. The urge to push was overwhelming now, like my body was begging for release. I gasped, my voice breaking. I think I need to push." The paramedic's expression turned serious. "Okay, I need you to listen to me. I know this isn't what you planned, but you're safe. We're here and we're going to take care of you and this baby. Just trust me, all right?" Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I wasn't sure if it was from fear, pain, or sheer exhaustion. Maybe all three. But I nodded. I didn't have any other choice. Daniel pressed his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered. "You can do this." I gritted my teeth and braced myself. I had no other option. This baby was coming. The paramedic guided me through it, coaching me when to push, when to breathe, when to rest. Time blurred together. I was only vaguely aware of Daniel's voice, the paramedic's encouragement, the distant sound of the sirens still wailing. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, I heard it. A cry. A small, sharp, beautiful cry. The room, or rather the ambulance, fell silent for a brief second before the paramedic let out a soft laugh. "She's here." She? My mind barely processed the words before I felt the warmth of a tiny body being placed against my chest. Tears streamed down my face as I looked down at my daughter for the first time. She was perfect, tiny pink, her little fists curled up near her face as she continued to cry. Daniel let out a shaky breath, his eyes wide with disbelief and overwhelming love. She's beautiful," I laughed, half from exhaustion, half from sheer relief. "We did it." The paramedic smiled. "You sure did." The ambulance was still stuck in traffic, but in that moment, none of it mattered. The wedding, the chaos, the stress of the past hour, it all faded away, because in that tiny space, inside a vehicle that wasn't meant for new beginnings, our daughter had come into the world. and she was perfect. The ambulance lurched to a stop, finally breaking free from the gridlock of traffic. I barely noticed the movement, still lost in the euphoria and exhaustion of just having given birth. My daughter, our daughter, was nestled in my arms, and for a fleeting moment I felt as if everything had somehow stopped. The siren was quiet now, and in the absence of noise, I could only hear the steady rhythm of her tiny breaths, the faintest of whimpers escaping her mouth as she slowly calmed in my arms. Daniel's hands hovered close, unsure where to place them, unsure what to do next. His face was still a little pale from the adrenaline, but his eyes, those eyes that had been filled with concern just minutes ago, were now alight with wonder and love. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's perfect, isn't she?" I smiled, the weight of the moment sinking in. "She is." For the first time in what felt like forever, I let out a deep, steady breath, my body finally relaxing for the first time in hours. The pain that had ruled my thoughts, my body, and my actions since the first contraction now seemed distant. All I could focus on was the tiny bundle in my arms, the little girl who had arrived in the most unexpected way. The paramedics, who had been working quietly in the background, shifted their focus toward us. One of them, the woman who had been beside me through the hardest part of the labor, was now carefully monitoring my vitals, making sure I was stable after the birth. The other paramedic checked on our daughter, weighing her briefly and measuring her tiny limbs. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, the female paramedic said with a satisfied nod. A healthy baby girl. I let out another shaky breath, my eyes never leaving my daughter's tiny face. "What should we name her?" I asked Daniel, my voice trembling with emotion. Daniel's eyes softened, his hand reaching out to gently touch our daughter's tiny fingers. "I've been thinking about this since the moment I found out you were pregnant. I've had a name in mind for months." I smiled at him, the exhaustion weighing on me, but not enough to dull the excitement. "Okay, what's the name?" He glanced down at our daughter, his face filled with tenderness. "Her name is Grace, because she is a gift." I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion. Grace. It felt right, a beautiful name for a beautiful little girl. The paramedic woman smiled warmly at us. "Congratulations, you've got a healthy baby girl. Now we'll get you both to the hospital for a checkup just to make sure everything's good." I nodded, the weight of the past few hours still pressing down on me, but in the best possible way. The ambulance doors swung open, and for a moment I was struck by the surrealness of it all. We were in an ambulance, on our way to the hospital, but I had just had a baby in the back of it. We hadn't made it to the hospital in time, but I couldn't help but feel that, in some strange way, this was the way it was always meant to happen. As the paramedics carefully loaded me and Grace into the hospital, I glanced at Daniel. He was still holding my hand, still looking at our daughter with that same look of awe and love. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "We did it." I smiled at him, leaning back into the stretcher, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. We did it. The hospital was chaotic, as any hospital would be during a busy shift, but we were quickly ushered into a room. Doctors and nurses checked on both me and Grace, ensuring that everything was going well. At this point, the exhaustion from the labor started to catch up with me, and my eyelids grew heavy. "I'm so tired," I murmured, my voice barely audible. Daniel stroked my hair gently, his presence like a grounding force. "I know. But you did amazing. You're incredible, you know that?" I smiled sleepily, not needing to say anything in return. His words were enough. They checked Grace over one more time, making sure her vitals were stable and that she was adjusting well to the world outside the womb. She was a picture of health, small but strong, her eyes blinking slowly as she adjusted to the light. As the doctor wrapped up the examination, he gave me a reassuring smile. "Everything looks good. You're both doing just fine." I nodded, still feeling like I was in a daze, but more at peace than I had been in hours. The worst part was over, the labor was behind me, and all I could focus on now was the beautiful little girl who had arrived in such an unexpected way. The hospital room grew quieter, and the weight of the past few hours slowly started to settle. Grace was asleep now, her tiny hands curled into fists as she lay peacefully in the bassinet beside me. Daniel sat at my side, his fingers entwined with mine. I think we should call Emma, I said, breaking the comfortable silence. She's going to want to know. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, I'm sure she's freaking out. But I'm glad you're both safe. I'm glad you're here, I replied softly. There was a knock at the door, and Emma stepped in, her face a mixture of excitement, concern, and curiosity. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes immediately locking on to the tiny baby sleeping peacefully beside me. Oh my God, Emma whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. You really had her? I nodded, smiling faintly as I gestured for her to come closer. Meet Grace. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she slowly approached the bassinet, gazing at Grace with awe. She's beautiful. I can't believe it. You had her while I was getting married? I laughed softly. Yeah, I guess it's a pretty crazy way to start a family, huh? Emma shook her head in disbelief. I don't even know what to say. You're a superhero, you know that? Hardly, I replied with a tired smile. I just did what I had to do. But still, Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. You were here for me today, and you still brought her into the world. I can't believe it. I'm so happy for you. Her words filled me with a warmth I hadn't expected. Despite the whirlwind of emotions I had experienced, despite the drama of the wedding and the chaos of labor, it was this moment, this quiet, intimate moment, that truly felt like the culmination of everything. I'm so proud of you, Emma continued, wiping a tear from her cheek. You're a mom now. I guess I am, I said softly. I guess I really am. We all sat in silence for a few moments, just taking it all in. It felt surreal to think that, in the span of just a few hours, I had gone from attending my sister-in-law's wedding to giving birth in the back of an ambulance. But as I looked at Grace, peaceful and perfect in her tiny blanket, I knew that it didn't matter how chaotic or unexpected the day had been. Life had a way of surprising us, and sometimes the most beautiful things came out of the most unplanned moments. And as I sat there, holding my daughter and surrounded by the people I loved, I knew that this was just the beginning. Grace had already brought so much love into our lives, and no matter what the future held, nothing would ever change the fact that she was here. She was ours. And that was all that mattered.